Where?
There's a station called PWG in town here. It's an oldie station.
Oh.
Just actually just turn how you're gonna stand that way.
Sorry.
Nice.
Overnight
Trip.
for one night a week. That was my start.
Look at this fog.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know.
That's great.
It usually doesn't stick around this late in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Move the sign.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nope, okay.
No?
Hopefully it gets
Give
bigger.
me just for a second.
Yeah, it'll be.
I think it should be okay, yeah.
And then,
We don't have a lot.
does it work for you if I,
want
even if
something?
you ask something over there, I'm
This would be probably the best
Yeah.
route.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just kind of look
Doesn't
center.
matter if you're, yeah,
Yeah.
as long as you're looking straight ahead is good,
Mhm.
from a radio point.
Okay.
Use Joe. We can use Joe as a prop.
I guess what it is.
Oh my god, that's so funny. Okay, I'm
All
ready.
right, I'm rolling. Yeah,
Okay.
everyone good?
So I'll go ahead and just begin, and then, of course, questions afterward.
Okay.
So the Stockton Police Department, we just finished our most recent strategic plan that is for 2020, 2021, and 2022. We've historically done 3-year strategic plans because we think it's important for us to have a blueprint or a framework on where the department has been, but where we intend to go next. It's so important to have measurements, metrics for an organization like a police department to hold ourselves accountable to what our values are, what our mission statement is, what our goals and objectives are for the safety and security of our community. I'm particularly proud of this strategic plan because it was not just created by me or by my top executive staff. This was actually created by our community and our police department from top to bottom. We got input from line level staff all the way up through our commanders, all civilian staff, not just our police officers, and we also used our community advisory board to get community input on what they wanted to see. Really, what were the priorities for the Stockton Police Department? How should the Stockton Police Department police this community? And so through a lot of hard work and with a partnership with the University of Pacific at Leadership Center, we put together this strategic plan. And I think it's, again, it's not too different from where we've been headed the last few years. It just expands on it. It gives us a little bit shift in a few different areas, but really what we heard from our community and from our police department is we still need to reduce crime, reduce blight, improve trust in our community, and hire a very diverse and professional workforce. And so those 4 primary goals are going to be where our police department continues to move as forward into 2020 and beyond.
What will be the biggest difference that you see from the previous plan?
We found one big difference is we're not in a position where we're hiring large numbers of police officers anymore. When Measure A passed, we were short well over 100 officers. We really found we're close to being fully staffed now. We're about a 3 to 5% vacancy rate. So we've hired a lot of those Measure A officers. Now it's about increasing our diversity in the police department as we continue to hire staff, and also ensuring we're doing more and more training. Keep in mind, we are a city that went through bankruptcy, and so we added a lot of officers, but we weren't doing as much training. So there's a heavier emphasis on training our staff, again for the diversity piece, and then a continual focus on reducing violent crime, shootings and homicides most specifically, as well as more of an increase on our work on blight. So this has a lot to do with the homeless encampments, things we're seeing around town that have to do with blight and code enforcement issues. We are figuring out new ways to even approach that in a more progressive manner.
And in what kind of ways, Chief, are you approaching that? I spoke to just a neighbor on the street who said that, we keep seeing more and more of that, more smoke, the air is getting dirtier.
Yeah, so we've heard from the community that there's been frustrations on blight and what we would call the trash in the streets or the homeless encampments, things like that. So we have what are called the neighborhood betterment teams that we go through different parts of the city, officers, and also code enforcement officers, fire. We work with fire on code issues, business, building permit section. It's an all hands on deck approach to just go into those communities and really work with the community and with the neighborhoods on reducing the amount of blight there. So we rotate between 6 primary areas throughout the city, trying to look for more long-term solutions. Now, for example, when it comes to homeless encampments, we know that police are not the solution for that. We deal with the symptoms of it. It is a larger social issue than law enforcement. So we're looking at leveraging a lot of our partnerships with other social services and with the county on dealing with that. But we have increased the amount of cleanups that we do throughout the city. They're not enough, but we have increased that amount.
How are the gang sweeps, the recent gang sweep, have they lessened the crime element, I guess, and also the number of violent crimes, I suppose, in the city?
We do quite a few enforcement missions, which have federal, state, county law enforcement partners do them with us. These large-scale enforcement missions are focused on our most at-risk or active gangs and gang members that are involved in the group gun violence. Those enforcement missions are necessary because it's part of our ceasefire message, which is the community and clergy have such a critical part to do, but there's also an enforcement piece that is important. And we might not necessarily be dismantling gangs entirely or groups, but we are disrupting them enough to at least stop a lot of the retaliatory violence. For example, many homicides are not necessarily predictable or preventable, but we do know that retaliatory group gun violence can be reduced, and a lot of that is done through enforcement missions. And so we will expect in this community to see those continue, if not more. Both state and federal partners have remained committed to help giving us the resources to really address the group gun violence. And even though we had more homicides last year than we would have liked, absolutely, 1 homicide is too many. The fact that we saw 2 consecutive years of lower homicides than we had in the past is at least signaling to us that we're headed in the right direction with this blueprint, with this framework, and with the way we are working with our other enforcement partners and community members.
Well, I saw one report, I mean, as far as, I think it was some website where they talked about Stockton being among the lowest 3% as far as in terms of violent crime in the cities. Among the most dangerous cities in the top 100 cities in the US, though. Any way to see it chipping away at that or not?
I think the goal is to reduce that as well as our strategic plan says, but it's going to be fairly small reductions over a large amount of time is likely to be the case, because Stockton has historically been in high violent crime categories, both statewide and nationally. But I think it's also important to look at what other categories is Stockton in that could maybe deal with the root causes of violent crime and crime in general. So we have other issues like poverty, illiteracy, joblessness, right? Those things are all connected, as any top criminologist would say, are connected to our crime and violent crime. We also have generational gang issues that are in Stockton that have been for decades. So I think the fact that we are seeing reductions in the long term, over the long-term trend line, is showing us that we're working in the right direction, but it also shows we have a lot more hard work to do, and it's going to be take a lot of tenacity, and that's one reason I'm very proud of the men and women of the Stockton Police Department. They work hard every day, and we're seeing some long-term successes. Not huge reductions like we would like to see, but we are considering that we are chipping away at this issue over the long term.
How important has transparency been, I suppose, in terms of connecting with the community? I mean, obviously, I think there's been more, I guess, of an outreach to community groups as far as releasing information quickly and even, videotapes as far as from body cameras, et cetera. Has that helped in terms of reinforcing, I guess, the link with the community?
Yes, one of the primary goals is the trust building. So we absolutely know that increased trust within police can reduce crime, specifically violent crime. The two go together, especially in a lot of our communities most impacted by violent crime. And we understand there's distrust, not just in police, but just in systems. And so we've been really working hard bridging that trust gap through the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice and a lot of the other efforts we've been working on. I believe a big part of that trust building does come down to transparency. So I've heard from the community, my community advisory board, they want to at least have their police department be open, honest, transparent with information. They realize we can't release everything all the time, but we go to great efforts to give as much information as we can to the community and to all of our neighborhoods. We do a lot of that proactively without even being asked. We want to push information out because we think our community deserves to know what's going on in their neighborhoods, and they deserve to know what their police department is doing about it. Whether it's good or bad, it's important that we put information out and continue to put money in the community trust bank. Continual deposits based on being constantly proactive and transparent as we can be.
How many officers are now on force?
We have an authorized strength of 485. We usually have around in the 470s because there's always retirements and there's always a 3 to 5% vacancy rate. But we do have the most amount of police officer positions that we've ever had in the history of Stockton. Would I like more? Absolutely. There's a study going back to Anthony Braga, a professor, where we should probably have about 600 officers for a city our size, our population. But the whole point of a strategic plan, it's not necessarily how many police officers you have, it's how are you using those police officers. And that's really what the strategic plan is about.
What was your low point during the bankruptcy then, for the officers?
I remember we were a little below 320 at one time. And so to go from 320 or a little under that to 485 is a significant jump. And so we have a lot more police officers. And so what do I expect of those more police officers? Follow the strategic plan, work on trust building, get out of the police car, and have as many positive interactions with the community as possible. That really comes down to the definition of community policing for me and my department, is get out of the police car and have positive interactions and get to know the community. That's how you find out what's going on. That's how you increase trust. That's how you actually solve more crime.
Last year, of course, you had the spike in the homicide rate during spring. What can you do differently this time around, this year, to prevent that from happening again?
We do know through the study of especially group gun violence, there are going to be spikes sometimes. And in that case, in spring of 2019, we saw several different groups all erupt at the same time in a conflict that we just did not see coming. The street intel didn't tell us it was coming, nor did the data. So we responded quickly. That's when we initiated Operation Raven, which is reducing violence in the neighborhoods. And that was really a call out to the community and to the federal and state law enforcement agencies that we need to work hard, roll up our sleeves on this violent crime spike. I believe we were successful in reducing that spike. Anything we can do to prevent yet another one is critical, and that's really we call out to our nonprofits, our community, our Office of Violence Prevention. Really, their goal is to prevent that from happening, so it doesn't just require a law enforcement response.
Was that more of an anomaly, more of a surprise than that happened to you?
For us, it was the fact that so many groups erupted in different conflicts at the same time was what was unique to create that spike for us here in Stockton.
Had you seen something like that before in recent years?
I would say that spike was similar to what we saw in 2012, so some time ago. However, we were to get a handle on that spike much swifter than we were able to back then. We did much more real-time policing, leveraged our partners much quicker, and I think that's what gave us better results than what we did see in 2012 when the spike really carried through the entire year.
And the Operation Raven, obviously you reach out to them again if necessary.
Absolutely. Right. Yes, the partners in Operation Raven are continual partners anyway, but through Operation Raven, we just brought in more of them because we had a capacity issue. We had too many conflicts going on at the same time. So all of the partners from U.S. Attorney's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, California Highway Patrol, they have all given me the word that they will actually continue to work with us should another spike like that occur. But we work with those partners all the time because it's a regional approach that's really going to be able to really address the violent crime issues in a community. It's not one agency, it's not one organization, it's not one piece of the community. It's shared public safety, it's everybody.
You know, I had 34 murders last year, 33 murders the year before. There was, I think that the greatest count was 71 one year. Do you know what year that was?
We had 71 homicides in 2012, and that was the largest amount we had ever had. And so that was the year where we saw what I would characterize as a huge spike that never subsided really that whole year.
That's primarily from gang activities.
That was primarily group gun violence that was retaliatory in nature. So I would say the dynamics throughout 2012 were similar to the dynamics we were seeing in early 2019 that we were able to get a handle on through all of those different partners. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.